What would you do if you took out the trash after a grueling diner shift, only to watch the city's most ruthless crime boss put a bullet in someone's chest? You'd probably run. You'd probably drop to your knees and beg for your life. But when 17-year-old Lily, a homeless waitress with absolutely nothing left to lose, looked down the barrel of a smoking gun, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked up at the man who owned the city's underworld and asked one chilling question. "Are you going to kill me, mister?" This is a true-to-life story of blood, betrayal, and a twisted salvation you will never see coming. The neon sign above the brass spoon had been flickering with a menacing buzz since October, casting a sickly, intermittent red glow over the wet asphalt of South Boston. It was 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The freezing rain was coming down in sharp, agonizing needles, turning the city's slush into a treacherous slip and slide. Lily Jenkins pushed the heavy metal back door of the diner open with her shoulder, dragging two black, heavy-duty trash bags behind her. She was 17, though the deep bruised bags under her eyes and the sharp hollows of her cheeks made her look both 12 and 30 at the same time. Her uniform, a pale pink dress that smelled permanently of stale French fries, bleach, and cheap coffee, was hidden beneath a men's oversized flannel jacket she'd found at a Goodwill bin 3 months ago. Her manager, a perpetually sweating tyrant named Carl, had docked her pay by $10 that night because she had dropped a mug. $10 meant 2 days of decent meals, or half a tank of gas for the rusted 1,998 Ford Astro van parked 2 blocks away. The van was her home. It had no heat, no working radio, and the passenger window was taped up with clear plastic that flapped violently in the winter wind. She was exhausted. A deep, bone-rattling exhaustion that made her limbs feel like they were filled with wet sand. Lily hoisted the first bag into the rusted dumpster. The smell of rotting lettuce and grease wafted up, but she was numb to it. She bent down to grab the second bag when she heard the voices. They weren't loud. In fact, it was the terrifying hushed tone of the voices that made the hairs on the back of Lily's neck stand up. They were coming from the narrow alleyway just beyond the dumpster, cloaked in the heavy shadows where the streetlights couldn't reach. "I swear to God, Dom. I swear on my mother's grave," a voice pleaded. It sounded wet, choked with tears and blood. The Morettis, they grabbed my brother. They told me if I didn't give them the port schedules, they'd send him back to me in pieces. I had no choice. Lily froze, her fingers digging into the plastic of the trash bag. She held her breath, pressing her back against the freezing wet brick of the diner's exterior wall. "You always have a choice, Tommy," a second voice replied. This voice was a low, resonant baritone. It was calm, too calm. There was no anger in it, only the chilling finality of an executioner reading a sentence. "You chose your brother over the family. I understand. But you know the rules. A rat doesn't get to crawl back into the nest. Dom, please, we grew up together. We took our first communion together, for Christ's sake. Say hello to God for me, Tommy." Crack. The gunshot wasn't deafening like in the movies. It was a sharp, suppressed pop, like a heavy textbook being slammed flat onto a wooden desk. But in the dead of the night, it echoed off the brick walls with terrifying clarity. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her hands, slick with rain and grease, slipped from the trash bag. The heavy plastic tore against a piece of jagged metal on the dumpster, spilling broken glass, wet coffee grounds, and tin cans directly onto the asphalt with a deafening crash. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. "Leo," the calm voice commanded. Footsteps splashed through the puddles, heavy and deliberate, rounding the corner of the dumpster. Lily didn't run. Where would she go? Her van wouldn't start half the time, and the soles of her sneakers were held together by duct tape. She simply stood there, trembling from the cold, staring as 2 men emerged from the shadows. The first man was broad, holding a suppressed pistol at his side, but Lily's eyes were drawn to the second man. Dominic Falcone. Even a street kid like Lily knew his name. He was a phantom who owned half the politicians in the state and controlled the docks with an iron fist. He was dressed in a tailored, charcoal gray overcoat that seemed completely impervious to the rain. His dark hair was slicked back, and his sharp, angular face was set in stone. The only imperfection was a microscopic speck of blood on his pristine white collar. Dominic's cold, dark eyes locked onto Lily. She looked at the gun in Leo's hand, then at Dominic. For the last 3 years, Lily had bounced from an abusive foster home in Roxbury to the streets. She had been beaten, starved, frozen, and discarded by every adult she had ever met. Every single day was a battle for basic survival, a relentless, grinding misery that had slowly eroded her will to fight. As she looked at the impeccably dressed Mafia boss and the smoking gun, a bizarre wave of peace washed over her. It would finally be over. No more freezing Van. No more Carl. No more hunger pangs that kept her awake until dawn. Dominic stepped forward, raising his own weapon, pointing it directly at her chest. Wrong place, wrong time, kid. Lily didn't flinch. She didn't drop to her knees. She just tilted her head up, letting the freezing rain wash over her pale face. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, devoid of any tremble or fear. "Are you going to kill me, mister?" Dominic paused. His finger eased off the trigger just a fraction of a millimeter. He was used to screaming. He was used to sobbing, bargaining, people offering him money, loyalty, their own family members just for one more day of life. He had never, in his 40 years on this earth, seen a 17-year-old girl look down the barrel of his gun with absolute devastating relief. "What did you say?" Dominic asked, his voice dropping an octave. "I asked if you're going to kill me," Lily repeated, hugging her flannel jacket tighter around her thin frame to ward off the chill, entirely ignoring the firearm. "Because if you are, can you do it quick? It's really cold out here, and my shoes are wet." Leo scoffed, raising his weapon. "She's out of her mind. Step back, Dom, I'll handle the loose end." "Wait," Dominic ordered, his eyes narrowing. He stepped closer, the faint smell of expensive cologne and gunpowder washing over Lily. He looked at her bruised eyes, the painfully thin wrists protruding from the oversized jacket, and the faded plastic name tag pinned to her uniform collar. "Lily." "You want to die, Lily?" Dominic asked, his tone shifting from authoritative to genuinely curious. "I just want to go to sleep," she answered honestly, her voice cracking for the first time. "I'm just so tired." Dominic Falcone lowered his gun. He stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. In her hollow eyes, he didn't see a threat. He saw a mirror of the crushing poverty he had clawed his way out of 30 years ago on these exact streets. "Put the gun away, Leo," Dominic said quietly. "Dom, you're breaking protocol." She saw Tommy. She saw us. "I said put it away," Dominic snapped, the sudden violence in his voice making Leo flinch. Dominic turned back to Lily. "Walk with me." "Where are we going?" Lily asked, her teeth chattering so violently she could barely form the words. "To the car," Dominic replied, not looking back as he strode out of the alleyway. Leo fell in step beside Lily, grabbing her roughly by the bicep. "Don't try anything stupid, rat." Lily stumbled over her broken sneakers but kept pace. She didn't care enough to try anything stupid. A sleek, black-armored Lincoln Town car was idling silently at the curb. The driver, a mountain of a man with a thick neck, jumped out and opened the rear door. "Get in," Dominic instructed. Lily climbed into the back seat. The warmth of the car hit her like a physical blow. The interior smelled of rich leather and warm air conditioning. It was the most luxurious thing she had ever sat in. She immediately realized her soaked, grease-stained uniform and filthy jacket were leaving damp, dirty patches on the pristine upholstery. She tried to shrink into the smallest ball possible, pulling her knees to her chest. Dominic slid in next to her, pulling the door shut. Leo got into the passenger seat up front. The partition window was rolled up, isolating the back seat in a quiet, tense bubble. "Drive. Head to the Brookline estate," Dominic ordered through the intercom. The car pulled smoothly away from the curb, leaving the neon sign of the brass spoon and the dead body of Tommy Garofalo in the rearview mirror. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the back of the car was Lily's ragged breathing and the rhythmic thumping of the windshield wipers. Dominic sat perfectly still, staring out the window at the blurred city lights. He reached into a hidden compartment between the seats, pulled out a thick wool blanket, and tossed it onto Lily's lap. She looked at the blanket, then at him. "Why didn't you shoot me?" Dominic finally turned to her. In the soft amber glow of the passing streetlights, his face looked less like a monster and more like a weary businessman. "You're an anomaly, Lily. I don't like anomalies. They make me curious. I'm not an anomaly. I'm a waitress. A waitress who isn't afraid of a loaded .45 caliber pistol," he corrected, leaning back. "Who do you work for? The police? The Moretti family?" Lily let out a dry, hacking laugh that quickly turned into a cough. I work for Carl. He pays me $6 an hour under the table, and he steals my tips if I drop a plate. If the Morettas paid me, I'd probably have fixed the heat in my van. You live in a van. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Dominic was putting the pieces together. The smell of the streets on her, the severe malnourishment, the absolute lack of self-preservation. Since October. Before that, a group home. Before that, doesn't matter. Lily muttered, pulling the wool blanket tightly around her shoulders. The warmth was making her eyelids incredibly heavy. If you're going to chop me up and throw me in the harbor, you should just tell me, I'd rather know. Dominic let out a low, humorless chuckle. I'm not going to chop you up, but I can't let you go back to that diner either. You saw something you shouldn't have seen. If the police find out, you become a liability. If the Morettas find out you were there, they will torture you to get to me. So I'm a prisoner. You're a guest, Dominic corrected smoothly. For now. Will there be food? Lily asked. It was a pathetic, childish question, but her stomach had been cramping for 2 days straight. Dominic's expression softened, just a fraction. He saw the genuine desperation in her eyes. Yes, Lily. There will be food. Unable to fight the exhaustion and the intoxicating warmth of the car any longer, Lily slumped sideways. She didn't mean to, but her head rested against the expensive fabric of Dominic Falcone's coat. Up front, Leo glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes widening in shock, waiting for his boss to shove the filthy street rat away. But Dominic didn't move. He simply stared out the window into the rainy night, a complex storm of memories and calculations brewing in his mind. He let the girl sleep. Lily woke up to the smell of fresh linen and lavender. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, completely disoriented. She wasn't in her van. She wasn't on the wet asphalt. She was lying in a massive 4-poster bed, with a mattress so soft she felt like she was sinking into a cloud. The room was enormous, decorated in muted tones of cream and gold. Heavy velvet curtains were drawn back, revealing a gray morning sky over sprawling, manicured grounds. She threw off the heavy duvet and looked down. She was no longer wearing her filthy uniform. Someone had dressed her in an oversized, incredibly soft cashmere sweater and silk pajama pants. Panic seized her. She scrambled out of bed, her bare feet hitting the heated hardwood floor. The door clicked open, and Lily stumbled backward, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from the nightstand as a weapon. An older woman stepped into the room. She was plump, wore a pristine black and white maid's uniform, and carried a tray laden with food. She stopped, looking at Lily with warm, sympathetic brown eyes. "Put the candlestick down, child," the woman said in a thick Italian accent. "It is heavy, and you will hurt your wrist." "Who are you? Where are my clothes?" Lily demanded, her grip tightening on the brass. "I am Maria. I run the household for Mr. Falcone. Your clothes were covered in motor oil and garbage. I burned them. Now, put the weapon down and eat. You look like a strong breeze would snap you in half." Maria set the tray on a small table near the window. The smell hit Lily like a physical force. Fluffy scrambled eggs, thick-cut bacon, fresh toast with butter, and a steaming mug of hot chocolate. The primal urge to eat instantly overrode her fear. Lily dropped the candlestick, practically running to the table, and began shoveling the food into her mouth with her bare hands. Slowly, "Piccola," Maria chided gently, handing her a fork. "If you eat too fast after starving, you will be sick." Lily took the fork but didn't slow down much. "Why is he doing this?" she asked between mouthfuls. "Why give me a bed and food?" Maria's smile faded slightly, a shadow of sorrow crossing her eyes. "Mr. Falcone, he has a complicated heart. He sees ghosts, I think. You are wearing his younger sister's old clothes. She died many years ago. She was about your age." Lily stopped chewing, the bacon suddenly tasting like ash. "I'm a replacement?" "No," Maria said firmly. "You are an insurance policy. He cannot kill you, but he cannot let you free. So, he will keep you safe. Wash up. He is expecting you downstairs in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, Lily stood at the entrance of a sprawling, sunlit dining room. The walls were lined with expensive art, and a massive crystal chandelier hung over a long mahogany table. Dominic Falcone sat at the head of the table. In the daylight, he looked even more intimidating. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt, cuffs rolled up, sipping an espresso while reading the Boston Globe. He didn't look up as she entered. "Sit." Lily sat at the chair furthest away from him. "Here are the rules, Lily," Dominic said, finally folding the newspaper and pinning her with a steely gaze. "You do not leave the estate walls. You do not use a telephone. You do not speak to the guards. You are dead to the world outside this gate. Do you understand?" "Carl is going to be so mad I missed my shift," Lily blurted out. It was a stupid thought, but her anxiety about her job was hardwired into her brain. "He's going to fire me." Dominic let out a dark, rumbling laugh. "Carl is the least of your concerns. By noon today, the brass spoon will be under new ownership. Carl has been relocated." Lily's eyes widened. "You killed my boss?" "I gave him a generous severance package and a one-way ticket to Florida. He won't be returning. Now, focus on my rules." "What happens when you get tired of me?" Lily asked, the bravery of the desperate returning to her. "When you realize I don't know anything, and keeping me here is a waste of your money?" Dominic poured himself another shot of espresso. "Then I will figure out what to do with you. Until then, you will read books in the library. You will eat what Maria cooks, and you will stay out of my way." He stood up, adjusting his cuffs, preparing to leave. "Welcome to the family, Lily." He turned toward the grand archway leading to the foyer. Suddenly, the deafening roar of automatic gunfire shattered the morning quiet. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the dining room exploded inward in a storm of jagged glass and splintered wood. Bullets ripped through the mahogany table, tearing the leather chairs to shreds and obliterating the crystal chandelier above. Lily screamed, freezing in her chair as a spray of bullets chewed through the wall mere inches from her head. "Get down!" Dominic roared. In a blur of motion, the ruthless Mafia boss lunged across the room. He tackled Lily out of her chair, throwing his large body over hers, pinning her to the floor beneath the heavy wooden table as a second barrage of bullets rained hell upon the room. The men who had come to kill the Falcone empire had just dragged a 17-year-old waitress directly into the crossfire. The world reduced itself to a high-pitched, agonizing ringing. It was a phantom siren echoing in Lily's skull, drowning out the shouting, the alarms, and the chaotic crunch of boots on pulverized glass. She was pinned flat against the antique Persian rug. The air was thick, tasting heavily of copper, drywall dust, and the sharp, sulfurous bite of gunpowder. Above her, the heavy, dark mass of Dominic Falcone remained perfectly still. For a terrifying, suspended second, Lily thought he was dead. She thought the man who owned Boston's underworld had just taken a bullet meant for him, but instead died shielding a homeless 17-year-old waitress. Then Dominic grunted. It was a low, animalistic sound of pain. He shifted his weight, rolling off her and immediately pulling a compact, matte black Glock from a concealed shoulder holster. He didn't look at her. His dark eyes were locked on the decimated remains of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The sprawling manicured lawn beyond was chewed to pieces, the morning fog now mixing with gray smoke. "Stay down," Dominic hissed, his voice a gravelly whisper. Footsteps thundered from the hallway. Lily curled into a tight fetal position, covering her head, expecting another volley of gunfire. Instead, Leo burst through the grand archway, an assault rifle gripped tightly to his shoulder. Two other men in dark suits flanked him, their weapons drawn and sweeping the ruined room. "Boss!" Leo yelled, stepping over the shredded remains of a mahogany chair. "Perimeter is breached. They hit us from a stolen O'Brien and Sons landscaping box truck on the service road. The shooters are gone. Guard detail at the south gate is down." Dominic slowly pushed himself up to a kneeling position. As he did, the pristine white fabric of his dress shirt tore away, revealing a gruesome sight. A massive, jagged shard of the crystal chandelier, easily 6 inches long, was driven deep into his upper left shoulder. Thick, dark blood was pulsing from the wound, rapidly soaking his shirt and dripping onto the ruined rug. "Dom, you're hit," Leo said, dropping his rifle to its sling and rushing forward. "We need to get you to the bunker. I'm calling Dr. Harrison." "We can't risk Mass General. The police scanners are already going crazy." Dominic tried to stand, but his knee buckled. The blood loss was happening too fast. He leaned heavily against the splintered base of the dining table, his face draining of color, turning a waxy, translucent gray. Leo reached for him, but Dominic waved him off with his good arm. "Secure the perimeter, Leo. Nobody gets in or out of this estate. Nobody." I'm not leaving you bleeding out on the floor, Leo snapped, genuine panic breaking through his hardened Mafia exterior. While the two men argued, Lily finally moved. The paralyzing fear that had gripped her shattered, replaced by a cold, familiar survival instinct. She had seen blood before. She had seen a man stabbed outside the shelter in Roxbury, and she knew that when blood pulsed to the rhythm of a heartbeat, a person only had minutes. Without thinking, Lily grabbed the hem of her oversized, expensive cashmere sweater, the one Maria had put on her just an hour ago, and ripped it violently. The thick fabric resisted, so she bit into the seam with her teeth and tore a long, thick strip from the bottom. She crawled over the broken glass, ignoring the sharp bites as tiny shards sliced into her bare knees. "Hey, back off, rat!" Leo barked, raising a hand to shove her away. "Shut up and hold his arm," Lily screamed back. It was the loudest she had ever spoken in her life. The sheer ferocity in her voice caught Leo completely off guard. He froze. Lily didn't wait for permission. She grabbed Dominic's bleeding arm. The Mafia boss flinched, his eyes snapping to hers. They were clouded with pain, but the sharp, calculating intelligence was still there. "It's an arterial bleed," Lily said rapidly, her hands moving with frantic precision. "If you pull the glass out, he'll bleed to death in 2 minutes. We have to pack around it and cut off the circulation above the wound." She wrapped the cashmere strip high up on Dominic's bicep, just beneath his armpit. "Leo, I need a pen, a stick, anything." Leo, momentarily stunned into obedience by the commanding tone of the street kid, reached into his jacket and pulled out a heavy, silver Mont Blanc fountain pen. Lily snatched it, slipped it under the cashmere knot, and began to twist. She twisted it brutally hard, using it as a makeshift windlass for the tourniquet. Dominic let out a sharp, breathless hiss through his teeth, his jaw clenching so hard it looked like it might shatter. "Hold this," Lily ordered Dominic, pressing the pen into his right hand so it wouldn't unwind. She then grabbed the pristine white linen napkins from the ruined table, crumpled them up, and packed them tightly around the base of the protruding crystal shard to stabilize it. The heavy pulsing of blood slowed to a manageable seep. Lily sat back on her heels, breathing heavily, her hands slick and stained with crimson. She wiped a streak of sweat from her forehead, leaving a smear of Dominic's blood across her pale skin. Dominic looked at his stabilized arm, then up at the 17-year-old girl kneeling in the glass. The silence in the ruined dining room was heavy, broken only by the distant wail of approaching police sirens on Route 9. "Where did you learn to do that?" Dominic asked, his voice steadying. "You live on the streets long enough. You learn how to keep people from dying," Lily replied flatly, refusing to break eye contact. "Now, are we going to that bunker, or are we going to wait for the cops to arrest us?" Leo stared at her, an unreadable mix of hostility and begrudging respect flashing across his rugged face. "Help me get him up," he grunted to the guards. As they hoisted Dominic to his feet, the mob boss turned his head slightly toward Leo. "She comes with us to the safe room. Do not let her out of your sight." The safe room beneath the Brookline estate was a stark contrast to the gilded luxury above. It was a concrete fortress buried deep underground, lined with banks of surveillance monitors, weapon racks, and a fully stocked emergency medical bay. The air smelled of sterile alcohol wipes and stale coffee. Dr. Harrison, an older, balding man with shaking hands and a revoked medical license, had arrived through a secret tunnel entrance 20 minutes ago. He was currently working behind a heavy curtain, meticulously removing the crystal shard from Dominic's shoulder and stitching the torn muscle. Lily sat quietly in the corner on a metal folding chair. Maria had brought her a fresh, oversized t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants, taking away the blood-soaked pajamas. Lily sat with her knees pulled to her chest, watching the bank of security monitors. They showed the police outside the estate gates, crime scene tape flapping in the wind, and Dominic's lawyers already stonewalling the detectives. Leo was pacing the length of the concrete floor like a caged tiger. He was furious, yelling into a secure satellite phone. "I don't care what the Morettas claim. They orchestrated this. They knew exactly where he was sitting. No, you find out who drove that truck and you break every bone in their hands until they give us a name." He snapped the phone shut, throwing it onto a steel table. He turned his blazing eyes toward Lily. "You!" Leo snarled, marching across the room and pointing a thick accusatory finger at her face. "This is too much of a coincidence. We pick you up off the street last night, and 12 hours later, A hit squad knows exactly where the boss is eating breakfast. You tipped them off. Lily didn't flinch. She just stared at his finger. I don't have a phone, Leo. I don't know anyone named Moretti. And if I wanted him dead, I wouldn't have tied a tourniquet on his arm. Leo. Enough. Dominic's voice boomed from behind the curtain. It was tired, but the authority was absolute. The curtain was pulled back. Dominic walked out, his left arm bound tightly in a black sling, his chest bare and wrapped in thick white gauze. He looked paler, older, but his presence still commanded the entire room. She's right, Dominic said, walking slowly toward the steel table and pouring a glass of water. She didn't have access to communications, and the hit was too coordinated. It takes days to steal a commercial truck, load it with a strike team, and map out the patrol routes of my guards. Then how did they know? Leo demanded, running a hand over his shaved head in frustration. Dom, you never eat in the east dining room. You always take your breakfast on the west patio. You only moved to the east room today because Maria thought the sunlight would be better for the girl. The Morettis fired entirely on the east windows. They knew. Dominic's eyes darkened. He set the glass down. There's a rat in the walls. It's someone on the inside, Leo agreed, his hand instinctively resting on his holstered weapon. Someone who was on shift this morning. Someone who saw the breakfast tray go to the east wing. I want every guard, every maid, every groundskeeper who was on the property this morning rounded up, Dominic ordered. Bring them to the warehouse district tonight. I'll handle the interrogations personally. Lily watched the two men. Her mind was racing. At the diner, she survived by reading people. She knew when Carl was going to fire someone just by the way he aggressively wiped the counters. She knew which customers would tip well and which ones would try to grab her skirt. She noticed details because her life depended on it. It wasn't a maid, Lily said quietly into the tense silence. Both Dominic and Leo turned to look at her. Excuse me? Leo sneered. Now the street rat is a detective? Let her speak, Dominic said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed her. Lily lowered her legs and sat up straight. When Maria brought me food this morning, she told me the rules. She said the guards don't come into the main house unless called. So a guard didn't see where my tray went. And the maids were all in the kitchen preparing for the day. Get to the point, Leo snapped. The point is, Lily continued, her voice remarkably calm, when I looked out my bedroom window this morning, I saw the main gate. I saw the guard on duty, the tall one with the scar on his jaw. Sullivan, Dominic provided, his expression tightening. He was standing by the guardhouse, but he wasn't looking out at the street, he was pacing, and he kept checking his phone, but it wasn't a smartphone. Lily closed her eyes, visualizing the moment with absolute clarity. It was a cheap blue prepaid flip phone, a burner. My manager at the diner used them to place illegal bets. You buy them at the gas station for $20, use them once, and throw them away. The safe room went dead silent. Leo looked at Dominic, the color draining from his face. Dom, Sullivan has issued a secure encrypted radio. We have a strict, no personal cell phones policy while on duty to prevent geolocation tracking. Why did he have a burner phone, Leo? Dominic asked. The calmness in his voice was far more terrifying than any shouting. It was the exact same tone he had used before executing Tommy in the alleyway. I don't know, Leo stammered. Bring me Sullivan, right now. Do not tell him what this is about, Dominic commanded. 10 minutes later, the heavy steel door of the safe room buzzed and swung open. Sullivan, a heavily muscled man in a black tactical suit, walked in. He looked nervous, his eyes darting immediately to Dominic's sling. Boss, thank God you're okay. We're locking down the perimeter. Empty your pockets, Sullivan, Dominic interrupted, his voice void of all emotion. Sullivan stopped dead in his tracks. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. Boss? Empty. Your pockets, Dominic repeated. Sullivan hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. He slowly reached into his tactical vest, pulled out his wallet, his keys, and set them on the steel table. Everything, Leo barked, stepping up close to the guard. Sullivan swallowed hard. With a trembling hand, he reached deep into a hidden side pocket of his trousers. He pulled out a small, cheap blue flip phone and set it next to his keys. Leo didn't hesitate. He grabbed Sullivan by the throat, driving the much larger man backward until he slammed violently against the concrete wall. Leo's gun was drawn and pressed directly under Sullivan's chin before the guard could even raise his hands to defend himself. "Who did you call?" Leo roared, spit flying from his lips. "How much did the Morettis pay you to sell out the boss?" "Leo, wait, please!" Sullivan choked out, his eyes wide with terror, tears instantly springing to his eyes. "They have my daughter. They sent me a picture of her at her bus stop. They said if I didn't tell them what room Dom was eating in, they'd put her in a wood chipper. I had to." Dominic walked slowly across the room. He didn't look angry. He looked profoundly exhausted. He stood next to Leo, looking at the sobbing man pinned to the wall. Lily sat frozen in her chair. She had just handed a man a death sentence. The realization crashed over her like a tidal wave of ice water. She had used her survival skills, her keen observation, to protect herself and the man who had sheltered her. But in doing so, she had fully crossed the line. She wasn't an innocent bystander anymore. She was an active participant in Dominic Falcone's bloody empire. "You should have come to me, Sullivan," Dominic said softly. "I would have protected your daughter. I would have rained hell on the Morettis." "I was scared." "Dom, please, I've been loyal for 10 years. "I know," Dominic said, "and because of those 10 years, I will make sure your daughter is safe. You have my word on that." Dominic gave a fractional nod to Leo. Lily squeezed her eyes shut and clamped her hands over her ears, burying her face in her knees. The gunshot in the concrete room was deafening. The sound of the gunshot inside the concrete walls of the bunker did not just echo, it reverberated through Lily's very skeleton. It was a physical force that rattled her teeth and forced all the air from her lungs. When she finally peeled her hands away from her ears and opened her eyes, the heavy metallic stench of fresh blood and burnt powder had completely overwhelmed the sterile smell of the medical bay. Sullivan lay crumpled on the cold concrete floor, a violently expanding pool of dark crimson forming beneath his head. Leo was already holstering his weapon, his face an impassive mask, as if he had just swatted a fly rather than ended a man's life. Lily's stomach violently revolted. She scrambled out of the metal folding chair, dropping to her knees next to a stainless steel medical waste bin, and wretched. There was nothing in her stomach but Maria's breakfast, and she heaved until her throat burned and her eyes streamed with tears. A heavy, warm hand rested on her trembling back. She flinched, gasping for air, and looked up. Dominic was standing over her, his good arm extended, holding a paper cup of water. His face was pale from his own blood loss, but his dark eyes were unnervingly steady. "Rinse your mouth," he commanded quietly. Lily took the cup with shaking hands. "You killed him," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He was just trying to save his little girl." "I killed a traitor," Dominic corrected, his tone devoid of malice, carrying only the cold, hard weight of a judge reading a sentence. "In my world, Lily, a fractured foundation brings the whole house down. If I let a man live after he sells my life to the Morettis, I project weakness. If I project weakness, 50 more men die tomorrow in a turf war. That is the reality of the crown I wear. But I gave him to you," Lily sobbed, wiping her mouth with the back of her trembling hand. "I pointed him out." Dominic knelt, a wince briefly crossing his features as his wounded shoulder protested the movement. He forced her to meet his gaze. "You saved my life, and you saved Leo's life. You used your eyes, and you kept us breathing. Never apologize for surviving, kid. Out on the streets you were prey. Here you are learning to be the predator. It is a necessary evolution." He stood up, turning his back on Sullivan's body. "Leo, call the cleaners, then assemble a tactical team. We cannot stay at the Brookline estate. The police will be crawling all over it by nightfall with warrants, and the perimeter is blown." "Where are we moving?" Leo asked, pulling a burner phone from a lockbox on the wall. "The Seaport Warehouse." "The fish packing front on Northern Avenue," Dominic replied, adjusting his sling. "It's fortified, and the cold storage units mask thermal imaging. And Leo?" Leo paused, his thumb hovering over the keypad. "Yeah, Dom? Find Sullivan's daughter. The Morettis likely have men watching her school to ensure Sullivan's compliance. Pull her out, find the mother, and give them $250,000 in untraceable cash. Put them on a private charter to Arizona tonight. I gave him my word she would be safe." Lily stared at Dominic, utterly bewildered by the paradox of the man. He had just brutally executed a father without blinking, yet he was about to spend a fortune and risk his own men to protect the man's orphaned child. It was a twisted, terrifying moral code, but it was a code nonetheless. It's risky, Dom, Leo warned. If the Morettis have hitters at the school, rolling up with a heavily armed extraction team in broad daylight is going to turn a middle school into a war zone. The feds will get involved. I don't care, Dominic said, his voice hardening. Get it done. Lily slowly stood up, her legs feeling like lead. She looked at the bank of security monitors. The police presence outside the estate gates had doubled. She thought about the little girl, sitting in a classroom, entirely unaware that her father was dead on a concrete floor and that armed assassins were waiting for the bell to ring. Your men can't go near that school, Lily said. Her voice was raspy, but the trembling had stopped. The street kid's survival instinct was completely taking over the trauma. Leo whipped around, clearly out of patience. Listen to me, you little. I said. Your men can't go, Lily interrupted, stepping forward, her eyes locked on Dominic. You drive black SUVs, you wear tailored suits, you look exactly like what you are. The Morettis will spot Leo from 3 blocks away, and they'll grab the girl before he even puts the car in park. Dominic tilted his head, intrigued. And what do you suggest, Lily? Me. The word hung in the sterile air of the bunker. I'm 17, Lily said, gesturing to herself. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt and baggy sweatpants. With her unwashed hair and pale face, she looked like an ordinary, exhausted teenager. I don't look like a Mafia hitman. I look like a high schooler picking up her little sister. I can walk right past the Moretti spotters, walk straight into the school office, and walk her out the back door while your men wait out of sight. Leo let out a harsh laugh. Absolutely not. She's a civilian. She's a flight risk. She gets out of our sight, she goes straight to the cops. If I go to the cops, I go back to the foster system. Lily shot back, her eyes flashing with genuine anger. Or I end up dead in an alley like Tommy. I know my options, Leo. I'm choosing the one that keeps me breathing. Dominic stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. He was evaluating her, weighing the immense risk against the tactical advantage of an invisible operative. Give her an earpiece, Dominic finally ordered. Boss, you can't be serious, Leo protested. Do it, Dominic snapped. Give her an earpiece, a panic button, and the extraction coordinates. If she runs, we lose nothing but a liability. If she succeeds, she proves her worth. Dominic stepped closer to Lily, his dark eyes boring into hers. You are playing a very dangerous game, Lily. If you double-cross me, there isn't a police station on the eastern seaboard that can keep you safe. Do we have an understanding? I'll get the kid, Lily said flatly. The bitter Boston wind whipped off the harbor, biting through the thin fabric of the dark green parka Leo had tossed her. It was 2:45 p.m. West End Middle School was a sprawling, red brick building, surrounded by a chain-link fence, bustling with the chaotic energy of impending dismissal. Lily walked down the cracked sidewalk, her hands shoved deep into her pockets, her head down. In her right ear, a microscopic flesh-colored earpiece buzzed faintly. I have eyes on you, kid, Leo's voice crackled in her ear. He was parked 2 blocks away in an unmarked plumbing van, watching through a high-powered scope. The girl's name is Chloe Sullivan. 7th grade. Look for the gray 4-door sedan parked directly across from the main entrance. 2 men inside. They've been sitting there for an hour. Lily didn't turn her head, but she shifted her gaze. She saw it. A nondescript gray Honda Accord idling in the loading zone. The windows were heavily tinted, but she could barely make out the silhouettes of 2 broad-shouldered men in the front seats. Moretti's watchers. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic, terrifying rhythm. Just yesterday, her biggest fear was Carl docking her pay. Today, she was walking the gauntlet between rival Mafia factions. She slouched her shoulders, adopting the bored, exhausted posture of a teenager who hated the world. She pulled a cheap piece of chewing gum from her pocket and popped it into her mouth, chewing loudly. She walked directly past the hood of the gray sedan. She could feel the eyes of the men inside tracking her. The hairs on her arms stood up. She forced herself not to speed up. Just a bored teenager, she repeated in her head. Just a nobody. She reached the heavy glass doors of the school and pulled them open, stepping into the warm, linoleum-floored hallway that smelled intensely of floor wax and tater tots. You're in the blind spot, Leo's voice murmured. Proceed to the main office. Get her out before the final bell rings and the chaos starts. Lily navigated the hallways, finding the main office. A tired-looking secretary with reading glasses perched on her nose looked up from a stack of papers. Can I help you, Han? "Hi," Lily said, snapping her gum, perfectly playing the part of an annoyed older sister. "My mom's car broke down on Storrow Drive. I had to take the T all the way down here. I need to sign out my sister, Chloe Sullivan. We have a family emergency." The secretary sighed, checking a clock on the wall. "Dismissal is in 10 minutes, dear. Can't you just wait outside?" "My mom is having a panic attack on the side of the highway and told me to get her now." Lily lied flawlessly, injecting just the right amount of teenage anxiety into her voice. The secretary relented, pressing a button on the intercom. "Mrs. Gable, please send Chloe Sullivan to the main office for early dismissal." 3 agonizing minutes passed. Lily stood by the counter, shifting her weight, her eyes darting to the front doors. Finally, a small, pale 12-year-old girl with pigtails and a heavy backpack walked into the office. She looked confused. "Are you Chloe?" Lily asked gently. The girl nodded. "Who are you?" "Where's my dad?" "Your dad sent me," Lily said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She stepped close to the girl, ensuring the secretary couldn't hear. "Listen to me very carefully, Chloe. Your dad is in trouble, and he asked me to bring you to him. But there are bad men outside waiting for you. We cannot go out the front doors." Chloe's eyes widened, filling with immediate panic. "What? What kind of trouble?" "The kind we don't have time to talk about," Lily said firmly, grabbing the girl's hand. She looked at the secretary. "Thanks. We're going out the side door. It's closer to the train station." Before the secretary could protest, Lily pulled Chloe down the hallway, heading toward the rear gymnasium exit. "Leo," Lily whispered softly, pretending to scratch her ear. "I have her. We're heading out the back, toward the athletic fields. Where are you?" "Rerouting," Leo replied, the sound of an engine revving bleeding through the comms. "Head across the soccer field to the alley behind the auto parts store on 4th Street. I'll meet you there in 2 minutes. Move fast, kid." Lily pushed the heavy metal panic bar of the rear exit. The cold air hit them instantly. They broke into a jog across the frosted grass of the soccer field. Chloe was struggling to keep up, her heavy backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "I don't understand," Chloe cried out, her breath pluming in the freezing air. "Why couldn't my dad come?" "Because he loves you, and he wanted you to be safe," Lily lied. The weight of the lie felt like a physical stone in her throat. She was holding the hand of a girl she had made an orphan just an hour ago. They reached the chain-link fence at the edge of the field. There was a gap where the wire had been peeled back. Lily shoved Chloe through first, then squeezed through herself, tearing the sleeve of her parka. They spilled out into the narrow, trash-strewn alleyway behind the auto parts store. "I'm turning down 4th Street now." 10 seconds, Leo's voice commanded. Suddenly, the crunch of gravel behind them made Lily freeze. She spun around. Standing at the entrance of the alleyway, blocking their path back to the school, was a man. It was one of the men from the gray sedan. He was wearing a heavy leather jacket, and his right hand was buried deep in his pocket, holding something heavy. "Well, well," the man said, a cruel smile spreading across his scarred face. "Looks like Sullivan tried to pull a fast one." Lily shoved Chloe behind her, her heart dropping into her stomach. The man took a step closer, his eyes narrowing, as he finally got a good look at Lily's face in the daylight. He stopped. His cruel smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, confused recognition. "Wait a minute," the man said, pulling his hand out of his pocket to point at her. "I know you. You're the waitress. From the diner last night. You were in the alley with Tommy." Lily's blood ran completely cold. The invisible girl was invisible no more. The Morettis now had a face. The heavy, suffocating silence of the alleyway was broken only by the ragged, terrified breathing of the 12-year-old girl cowering behind Lily. The man in the leather jacket took another step forward, the gravel crunching loudly under his heavy boots. His name was Sal, and he was a veteran enforcer for the Moretti family. The cruel, jagged scar running down his cheek twisted as his smile widened, his eyes locked onto Lily's pale face with predatory delight. "I don't believe it," Sal breathed, shaking his head. He pulled his hand fully out of his pocket, revealing a snub-nosed .38 revolver. He pointed it loosely at Lily's chest. "We tore up half of Southie looking for the rat who watched Tommy take his final nap. And here you are, playing babysitter for a dead man's kid." Lily's mind went entirely blank for a fraction of a second, the primal terror threatening to paralyze her. But then, the survival instinct. The same instinct that had kept her breathing through 3 brutal Boston winters on the streets snapped violently into focus. She felt the cold, hard plastic of the panic button in the right pocket of her parka. She pressed it, holding it down with her thumb until her knuckle turned white. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lily said, her voice shaking violently. She didn't have to fake the terror. It was entirely real. "Please, mister. I'm just taking my sister home." "Save it, kid," Sal chuckled, stepping closer, the barrel of the gun catching the gray afternoon light. "Dominic Falcone doesn't do charity. If he kept you breathing, it means you're important to him. You're leverage. Now, here's how this is going to work. You're going to put your hands on your head, and you're going to walk nice and slow to my car." "What about her?" Lily asked, shifting slightly to keep Chloe shielded behind her. Sal glanced at the sobbing 12-year-old. His eyes hardened into dead, soulless chips of flint. The boss only wanted the guard's kid to make the guard talk. The guard talked. "She's loose ends now." He raised the weapon, pointing it directly at Chloe's face. He was going to shoot the child right there in the alley. Lily didn't think. She didn't weigh the odds. She reached behind her, grabbed the thick canvas strap of Chloe's massive, textbook-filled backpack, and hurled it forward with every ounce of strength her malnourished body possessed. The heavy bag struck Sal squarely in the chest and face just as he pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the narrow brick corridor. The bullet went wide, sparking off the metal siding of the auto parts store, showering them in sparks and brick dust. Sal stumbled backward, swearing violently, swatting the heavy backpack away. That momentary distraction was exactly what Leo needed. A roaring engine echoed off the brick walls as a battered, unmarked white plumbing van tore around the corner of 4th Street. It didn't slow down. It didn't brake. Sal whipped his gun toward the massive vehicle, his eyes widening in sheer panic. He managed to fire 2 wild shots, shattering the van's windshield, before the 2-ton wall of metal slammed into him at 40 miles an hour. The sickening crunch of metal against bone echoed through the alley. The van pinned Sal violently against the brick wall of the adjacent building. The Moretti hitman didn't even have time to scream. The passenger side door of the van kicked open. Leo leaned out, glass raining from his shoulders, a heavy automatic rifle aimed directly at the crushed front grille to ensure the threat was neutralized. It was. "Get in!" Leo roared, his voice cracking like a whip over the hissing radiator of the smashed van. Lily grabbed Chloe by the collar of her jacket and practically threw the sobbing child into the back of the van, scrambling in right behind her. "Hold on," Leo shouted, throwing the van into reverse. The tires shrieked, burning rubber against the asphalt as he tore backward out of the alley, leaving the mangled remains of the Moretti hitman pinned to the wall. In the back of the van, amidst discarded pipe fittings and coiled copper wire, Lily collapsed onto the ribbed metal floor. Her hands were shaking so violently she couldn't even clasp them together. Chloe was curled into a tight ball in the corner, sobbing hysterically into her knees. Lily looked at her own hands. They were trembling, pale, and completely clean. Yet, she felt like they were stained crimson. She had just used herself as bait. She had looked a killer in the eyes. She had actively participated in a war that, 24 hours ago, she didn't even know existed. "Boss, it's Leo." The enforcer barked into a headset as he merged aggressively onto the highway, putting distance between them and the school. "We have the package. We had an entanglement in the alley. A Moretti spotter recognized the girl from the diner. I handled it, but they know what she looks like now." There was a pause as Leo listened to the voice on the other end. "Understood," Leo said quietly. He glanced in the rearview mirror, his hardened eyes meeting Lily's exhausted gaze. "We're 10 minutes out from the seaport." The seaport warehouse smelled of brine, freezing salt water, and old machinery. It was a massive, cavernous space lined with industrial freezers and crates of packed ice. Deep inside, past 3 layers of heavily armed guards, a makeshift command center had been established under the harsh glare of halogen work lights. Dominic Falcone stood by a metal folding table, his left arm still tightly bound in its black sling. He watched impassively as Chloe, still sobbing, was shoved into the arms of a terrified, weeping woman, her mother. "Take them," Dominic ordered 2 of his men. "Drive them straight to Hanscom Airfield. The jet is fueled. Do not take your eyes off them until they are in the air." The mother looked at Dominic, a mixture of profound terror and confusing gratitude washing over her face. She didn't speak. She just clutched her daughter and followed the guards out into the freezing night. The heavy steel doors slammed shut, plunging the warehouse back into an eerie, echoing silence. Only Dominic, Leo, and Lily remained in the command center. Lily was sitting on an overturned wooden crate, staring blankly at the concrete floor. The adrenaline had completely left her system, replaced by a bone-deep, crushing fatigue. She felt hollowed out. Leo stepped forward, dropping a heavy, black canvas duffel bag onto the metal table with a definitive thud. He unzipped it, revealing neat, tightly bound stacks of $100 bills. $250,000, Leo said gruffly. He looked at Lily, his hostility completely gone, replaced by a quiet, grim respect. You didn't run, you brought the kid back. You earned it. Lily slowly looked up from the floor, her eyes drifting from the money to Dominic. The Mafia boss walked slowly around the table, stopping a few feet in front of her. The harsh overhead light cast deep shadows over his sharp, patrician features. He looked at the dirt on her face, the tear in the shoulder of her oversized parka, and the hollow, deadened look in her eyes. I kept my word, Dominic said, his voice a low, resonant rumble in the cavernous room. Sullivan's family is safe. Now, we come to the matter of you, Lily. He gestured to the duffel bag with his good hand. That bag contains enough money to buy you a new life, a warm house, a car that runs, 3 meals a day for a very long time. You can walk out of that door right now, get on a bus, and disappear. Lily stared at the money. It was more wealth than she could physically comprehend. It was salvation. It was everything she had ever dreamed of while freezing in the back of her rusted Ford van. But, Dominic continued, the temperature in the room seeming to drop 10 degrees, Sal recognized you. The Morettis know your face now. If you take that bag and leave, you will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. You will jump at every shadow, because eventually they will find you, and when they do, I will not be there to protect you. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She looked away from the money, meeting Dominic's dark, fathomless eyes. You're telling me I'm a dead woman walking. I am telling you the reality of the streets you grew up on, Dominic corrected smoothly. You were prey yesterday, Lily. Today, you showed you have the teeth of a predator. You survived a hit squad. You orchestrated an extraction. You looked a Moretti killer in the eye and didn't blink. Dominic stepped closer, his presence entirely overwhelming. You asked me last night if I was going to kill you, mister. Lily swallowed hard, nodding once. The answer is yes, Dominic said quietly. The scared, starving little girl who lived in a van and let the world beat her down. She died in that alleyway last night. The question is, who walked out? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a heavy, matte black smartphone, placing it on the table next to the money. You can take the bag and run, Dominic said softly. Or you leave the bag, you take the phone, you stay within these walls, under my protection, you eat at my table, you learn my business. You become something they fear. Leo watched in stunned silence. Dominic Falcone did not take wards, he did not take apprentices. He was offering this homeless street rat a seat at the throne of the most powerful criminal empire in New England. Lily stood up from the crate. Her muscles ached, and her boots felt like lead. She walked slowly toward the metal table. She looked at the duffel bag of cash. It represented freedom. But it also represented fear, isolation, and eventually, a bloody end in a motel room somewhere. She looked at Dominic. He was a monster. He was a killer. But in the last 24 hours, he had given her food, a warm bed, and more respect than any legal authority figure ever had. In his twisted, bloody world, there were rules. There was loyalty. Lily Jenkins reached out her pale, trembling hand. She didn't touch the canvas bag of money. Her fingers closed around the cold, heavy metal of the black smartphone. She slipped it into the pocket of her parka and looked up at the most feared Mafia boss in Boston. The hollow, desperate fear in her eyes was entirely gone. In its place was something cold, sharp, and terrifyingly calm. When do I start? Lily asked. Dominic Falcone smiled. It wasn't a kind smile, but it was genuine. Welcome to the family, Lily. Did the explosive ending of this mob drama leave you completely speechless? From a starving waitress freezing in a van to the chosen protege of Boston's most ruthless crime boss, Lily's dark transformation is a story of survival at any cost. If you were hooked by the intense twists, the brutal betrayals, and Lily's shocking final decision, you have to hit that like button right now. Share this incredible story with your friends who love gripping, gritty underworld dramas. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our true-to-life thrillers. Now, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Did Lily make the right choice staying with Dominic to survive, or should she have taken the money and run? Let the debate begin, and we will see you in the next video.